My guest today is very, very excited about this one. Laura Westman, second time podcast guest, first time solo podcast guest. I had you and your good friend and my friend Bay LeBlanc Quiney on last year to talk mostly about your life as a podcaster. So you and Bay have a podcast called West of Wonderland. It's amazing. You two are Disney fanatics.
What? Yeah,
like what? Disney, what's that? Disney fanatics. And you and Bay have created a podcast that is about Disney and coaching because you're both coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And now Laura is back on for a very special episode where we are just going to talk about creative projects. And the reason I say we're going to talk about creative projects is because Laura Westman has her very own creative project to talk to us about, which is a book. So Laura wrote a book and here we are. So the name of the book is How to Be Creative in the Age of Digital Noise.
Yes.
And as somebody who relates to themselves as wildly creative in some ways and so wildly uncreative in others, I cannot wait to get some expertise or get some of your magic, because there's some ways where I just feel so uncreative. So for the audience, I want to kind of break down the book, and it's a small book, and then we're going to talk through each of these a little bit. So part 1 is about shedding light on the ecosystems you're in. Part 2 is about embracing your true voice, and part 3 is about creating your own experience. So Laura, welcome back. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. It's so great to be here. I was
Can
going to ask if I get
Yeah.
like a special jacket or trophy or tote bag for being on 2 times or something.
It's kind of like, what do they call that on Saturday Night Live when they have like the 5-time like Justin Timberlake and a few other people, they do a special event. Well, I don't know. I've had my buddy Steve Drum on 3 times now, and he's a Navy SEAL, so he might kill me if I don't give him something first. Like literally could kill me.
Oh my God.
I don't know. A thumbs up, would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I'll take it. That sounds great.
A virtual thumbs up. Well, Laura,
Totally.
I'm so excited to have you back on today. As you know, my format of the show is generally I have a little more structure to, but today we're just literally going to talk about what you've been up to. And congratulations on being a published author. I love to say this to all the authors. I have the world of respect for this because it sounds like my version of hell. Sitting down and writing a book is something. And I always like to start with authors and ask them the question. Normally the question is, why did you write the book? But I like to phrase it as, when did you know you needed to write this book? Because I've never met an author. Yeah. Every author I know is like, this is something I needed to do, because it's not easy.
Yeah. Well,
so when did you know you needed to write it?
So this book came together in some ways over the scope of many years. And in some ways it came together physically very quickly. So I think it's sort of a both and of like, the idea for this has kind of been cooking for a long time. But I think it was just mid-January of this year that I woke up, and it was almost like the idea had been planted in my mental inbox overnight, almost like in a dream. And the book just had to get written. I just took some time. I started working on it. I kind of treated it like a job for maybe a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And a month later, here it is in print, ready to go. So it's like, I think the content, at which because you've read through the book, the content has been a huge part of my life, just like bubbling and brewing over time. And I think it was honestly just this moment of, okay, as a coach, there's some things that you learn, and coaching isn't all about us and what we know, but sometimes we have a lot to offer, so
Mm-hmm.
I think I noticed over the last couple of years, I've been having the same conversation with people over and over about how stressed they are about their creativity because the internet exists and because of social media, and like how, its tentacles have just reached very, very far, and it just continues to go. And in some ways that's amazing for the possibility of creativity and getting your stuff in front of people. But I think for many of us, it actually is, this sounds a little bit dramatic, but I think it also can be very poisonous to the parts of us that just like to play very freely and create and experiment and have fun. And so I think it became very clear to me mid-January that there was a gift to give the world from my brain and from my experience. And I think the most accessible way to do that was to actually just make it into a short, very digestible book.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by short, I've got it right here in front of me. I've got a signed copy because I'm cool like that. It's 65 pages.
Yeah, Jason, I work in the realm of professional development, as you know,
Yeah,
and I have so many self-help books that I have read like 15% of, and then I just can't
totally.
get any further.
No. Yeah.
And so I didn't want to contribute to more quote unquote digital noise in people's space by giving them something that they're not going to finish, you know?
You're like, here's how to be creative and get out there and do your thing in 5,800 pages
Like,
of
no.
of yeah, small, right. Well, so Laura, I want to go into, before we talk about what some of the content in the book, I want to talk about what you mean by be creative, because that is a very subjective term. So
Yes.
how do you define being creative or be creative?
It's a great question, especially because I think for anybody listening who doesn't really think they are a particularly creative person, or, people like you have some spaces where you feel like you are deeply creative and some where you're like, it's just a no go.
To know.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times we kind of accidentally conflate being creative with being artistic. And
Yeah.
I think they're two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, my belief is that being creative is really about a sense of personal power
Mm.
and kind of like using some innate guidance system that we don't even always know where it's coming from, but there's something within us that helps us do things like put together really good meals or assemble stuff or create things for our business or even, come up with meeting agendas. For example, these are all creative acts. We just don't always think about them that way.
Yeah.
And I think that when we're doing things like that, there's a bunch of tiny little micro choices that we're making all the time. We're choosing this instead of this thing, or we're rearranging, or we're deciding this. We innately have this internal compass driving us all the time. And we just don't always think about it as creativity, but that's definitely what it is.
Yeah. I really like the point of artistic versus creative. That is exactly how I related to myself until about 5 years ago. I would always say to people, like, I'm not creative. I'm good at doing stuff, but I'm not good at creativity. But it's just like not true, because I'm extremely creative. And I know that now that I'm extremely creative in certain ways, but I really like that as a delineation, because that like opens up so much possibility for people that, like, and you said it, just to give you an example. If you asked me to paint something in watercolor, I don't even know if I would know what to do. Like, it just wouldn't be a thing that I know what to do. But if you said,
Mhm.
hey, can we brainstorm on new business models, I would have a million ideas for you.
Right. And like, how creative is that? So
Yeah, and how creative
creative.
is that? But even 5 years ago, I'd be like, well, that's not really creative. That's more business strategy. But no, that's like creativity.
Well,
Or if
yeah,
I,
because
yeah,
like, first of all, I think if you're having fun doing it, that is a good sign that there's like some creative energy happening. And
yes,
also with brainstorming things like that, especially someone like you, Jason, part of what's also happening is like a synthesizing of all of the experience that you've ever had. There's also this like dancing with different ideas and possibilities and like what could be. There's a lot of connections being made and things getting put together. So to me, a brainstorming session, even about business, it can be like a deeply creative
yeah,
experience, you know?
yeah. One thing I'll share about my vision or my experience with relating more to creativity is when I realized that it doesn't have to be right, and that it's
Yeah.
like the idea, and a lot of businesses have embraced this too, at least for, it's like no idea is a bad idea. Cause I think like, oh, that's a bad idea, we can't talk about it. I'm like, no, what if it wasn't a bad idea and it's just, but we don't have to do anything with it either. Like that's
Hmm.
opened up a lot for me too. I think from like doing the work, the coaching work and such too, just realizing like it's not that black and white either.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
so cool. So let's talk about, well, I want to ask you a question about writing the book. Did you find the writing of the book itself to be a creative experience for you?
Yes, there was something getting created. And there was a part of me in the writing of this book, I sort of had this out of body experience when I was doing it. I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Part of how when it comes to like producing creative things, like not just being creative or playing piano or being in my creative joy, like actually producing something. When I get really clear about like the form something is supposed to take, I can fill it in very quickly. So
Mm.
it was crazy. It was like I knew I wanted to create a book, like an actual physical product,
Yeah.
and I knew what the title was. And once I had those two things down, it just happened so fast. I was
Amazing.
like, what are the sections? How do we begin? What is the introduction that needs to get written so that people can really hear themselves in this and use this as the tool that I really intend it to be, you know? I
Yeah.
think with the exception of some of the section about like my story and my vocal nodes and some of the anecdotes about like theater camp and stuff. I asked my editor if it was too much, and she was like, no, it's actually very entertaining, you know?
Yeah.
So, because I didn't want this to be like, you know, it's not like my memoir book. It's
Yeah.
like, there are pieces of me in it, but I really wanted it to be a tool that people can use to get into action and even come back to over and over, you know, when they're actually feeling the stuck energy again, you know?
Yeah. Before we go into the book here, I do have one more question because you mentioned this, you're a musician, so you play a few instruments, but you also are a songwriter. I mean, a
Mhm.
musician and songwriter. This is another place where I'm a decent guitar player, but I don't know how to write songs, nor does it really call to me. I'd rather either improvise over somebody else's stuff or just play somebody else's stuff. When you're writing songs, lyrics, chords, like the whole thing, do you have a similar experience where you're like, once you kind of land on, oh, this is the feel I want, does it come naturally for you to fill in lyrics and, melody, harmony, etc.?
What a cool question. Sometimes, sometimes no.
Mm.
I don't have one of the things that I enjoy a lot about my songwriting process is I don't have one.
That
So,
sounds great.
you know,
I
like
love that.
there's so in my course, Intangible Creatives Academy, there is a module where I have legitimately outlined 7 different pieces of your creative process. And part of what the module does is it helps you chart which ones of those are very fun and easy and pleasurable versus which ones are really challenging, just so you have a scope of like the arc of your own creative process.
Yeah,
Yes, I just said that out loud. Yes, it is a thing. And yes, it is so cool and helpful.
that's
And
fun.
one of the sections, like the second to last section, is called the bringing it in for a landing section.
Mhm.
You know, when you're like pulling everything together, you're like actually finishing something. And so, in some ways, like that part of the process, both for the book and for writing songs for me, is consistent where there's like this, it does feel like a plane coming in to land. You know, you're like making sure everything is going in the same direction and like tying up loose ends and stuff like that. But for the most part, there are sometimes, I wrote a little bit about this in the book actually. There's sometimes when part of a song will just like occur to me out of nowhere. I've heard people talk about this. A lot of creative people and songwriters talk about how like they're kind of like little raindrops or like gifts from above. Like you don't know where they come from, but they just like
Yeah.
show up in your brain. And so I make a habit out of capturing them and then sometimes picking it back up later. One of the songs in my EP, the song Moving Out, the Laura song, if you will,
Yeah.
is one where like a little piece of that just dropped in once and I just tinkered with it over and over like a couple of months until suddenly it was like, this is the song. And then there are other times when I hear part of a song and the whole thing just sort of writes itself very quickly. And that's just what it is. And it's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So
Everything you're describing now this is where I'm like, that's foreign to me.
mm,
This is another example. Like if you told me, hey, let's go paint watercolors, I'd be like, it's going to look like a blob of water on the paper. I'm going to tell you that right now. If you said, hey, Jason, we're going to sit down or we're going to write a song together, I wouldn't even know where to begin other than the most basic music theory, because I understand music theory. But if you said to me, hey, Jason, can you play guitar for me on this track? I'd say, hey, what key are we playing in and what's the
mhm.
feel you want? And then I could do it. So I'm
Cool.
realizing in a lot of my creative endeavors, I'm not so good at a 0 to 1 type of function, like a 0 to 1. Like I don't know what the thing is, but I want to do it. Where I'm leaning into and realizing where I do my best creative work is when, hey, what's the basic guardrails we have? And I'm also, I know this isn't, a lot of people would say this isn't quite as creative or artistic. If you can tell me the output, I'm usually better. Like I'm usually
Mhm.
like my brain just works that way. Maybe it's like business training, but what's the output we're hearing? The output is, oh, like we're going to have a track that's 3.5 minutes long. And I want you to play the melody line and you're going to have a mini solo or a company versus like, hey, we're going to create a piece of music.
Mhm.
I just don't, I could probably get there or work on it, but it's not something that comes natural for me at all.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I
Yeah.
also often wish I operated more like you. Like for me,
Yeah.
if you were like, "Hey Laura, let's write a piece of music," I'd be like, "Okay, what does it need to feel like? Do you have any ideas? Where should we? Where do
I'd
you
be
want to
like, what does
begin?"
that
You know?
mean?
Yeah, totally. Like, and the other thing too, I did not write about this at all in the book, but it's a really important part of my relationship with my creativity. So I started taking piano lessons when I was 5.
Mm-hmm.
I have pretty small hands, but I took lessons for a very long time. It was just like part of me. And there came a point when I was a teenager when, first of all, because my hands are small, a lot of the classical pieces that you learn when you're taking piano lessons one to one like that for so long, you just need a bigger wingspan than I have.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that I have always been a person who feels the music more so than I want to be instructed as to how to deliver the music.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, my mom used to say something like, well, Laura just, God, what was it that she used to say? It was something along the lines of like, she's very expressive in her playing or something like that. Very expressive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gretchen Westman.
You're like,
Uh,
that I like that.
well, it's interesting because like part of my personal creative renaissance, like coming back into my creativity after leaving it for a while, is realizing how much it took a long time for me to even own the word musician. Because in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, if you are a musician, you are proficient in multiple instruments. You definitely don't have vocal nodes or recovering from vocal nodes. That's a no-no.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you've been to music school. And for me, like my relationship with the piano these days, like, yes, I can sight read okay, but like what I'm much better at is like if you give me a chord progression and you let me listen to the song for a while and then I can comp and it's no problem and it's really
Yeah.
fun. In fact, the only way that I really like to cover songs is like getting really used to them and then kind of putting my own spin on it.
Yeah.
But I get very anxious if I haven't played any of the songs on my EP with the band live, and I'd be very anxious to do it because I get very caught up in the music, and it's like hard for me to focus on more than one on like singing versus piano. Like it's something it's easier for me to do alone because if I mess up
Yeah.
tempo wise, it's just me,
Yeah. It's just you. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's one of those
Interesting.
things where I think, especially since we moved up here to the Hudson Valley and I now have like an actual upright piano instead of just a keyboard, I've really been starting to understand that it's not that I'm technically proficient. I mean, technically not proficient, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I just have a different way of engaging with the instrument. And it's a lot
Yeah.
more intuitive and feelings based than let me sit down and hit all the perfect notes and perfect rhythm. It's a very different way to engage with it.
Well, we've given the audience now, Laura, 2 examples of how this plays out in your book. So I'm going to take a very brief commercial break. When we come back, we're going to actually talk through each of the parts a little bit and have you give us the concept here. So we'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Laura, we're back. So Laura, part 1 of the book is titled Shedding Light on the Ecosystems You're In.
Yes.
What a mysterious and filled with, what exactly does that mean? So Laura, what does that mean and what do you want the audience to know about that?
So it's my belief that those of us who have like a relationship with our creativity, we soak up stuff around us. And sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not conscious and sometimes it's negative. And a lot of the challenges that I think creative people have in the age of digital noise, so to speak, is that we are constantly just surrounded by input without a lot of filtration as to like what the input is even doing or giving us. And the thesis of this book, How to Be Creative in the Age of Digital Noise, is really about answering that question, is like, for you personally, how do you become your creative self again with all of this noise all around you all the time? So the very first step of being able to identify any different habits is to really first take a look and distinguish what are the different components of the world that are surrounding me all the time. And I like to think about them like ecosystems, because
Yeah.
that's what they are. Like when
Yeah.
it's social media, it's your digital ecosystem. When it's your home ecosystem. It's your work ecosystem. And I think it's important to think about it that way, because I think some outdated models of thinking would probably, sorry, outdated sounds so like I know everything, but I just think like it's common, I think, in the realm of coaching and professional development to think about yourself as a silo, and that the goal of making changes is to make you more productive on whatever topic it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But I think that that's actually discounting a lot of the needs of creative people. Like, we don't exist in a silo. And to give advice based on the presumption that we do exist in a silo, it's just not going to work. And I think it's I think it's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to creativity in the digital age, is like, you know, you're scrolling all the time, you're seeing work that other people are doing, you're seeing, like, I don't know about you, but because I'm a coach, a lot of my feed is like the stuff from other coaches that are like, here's my cool tip, and they have branding and they have this and they have that. And it's just like all these little tiny moments, you're taking things in, you're seeing it, but also there is a little part of our minds that is also making it mean something. Usually making it mean something about us. You know, it's why they call it doom scrolling, is because it just like takes you further and further down your spiral of doom. So I think it's really useful to think about it like we are participating in these different ecosystems. We're exchanging energy between us and other people, et cetera, but we're also receiving. So that part of the book is really about helping you identify what they are, and then really getting very clear over time about like, okay, what's in the water, so to speak, in these different ecosystems? What am I soaking up? What's getting in my way? What's helpful? What's not helpful? Because, you know, like, I don't know, Jason, I think that to be letting yourself be creative in any way requires breathing space from the part of us that needs to like perform and do really well. And so there is, for a lot of people, most of the time, most of their workday is not like an emotionally safe time for them to be feeling very creative and inspired, because they've got that other thing on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they go home and they make themselves wrong for how tired they are and how hard it is to work on their creative project. It's like, that's not you. That's your ecosystem, you know?
Yeah. You're like, hey, boss, I know you're paying me this salary to be in sales or accounting, but I'd love to spend 4 hours just brainstorming on my next creative project. I'm like, no, we're not paying you for that. No. Cool.
Totally.
Sounds great to do on the weekend, Laura. Thanks so much for bringing it at least. But that's what the weekends were. We're not paying you for that. We're paying you for productivity and results.
Yikes. I know. Well, it's funny. I recently I was on a little mini panel about the relationship between creativity and well-being, but also what we're really talking about there is a professional development space. You know, often we need to justify spending our free time on our creativity. Like, it's just a thing, you know, the more that's on your plate, the harder it is to be like, I'm going to work on this thing that doesn't require results or output, or it's just frivolous and it's fun and whatever. The irony is, when you use your creative outlet, what you're really doing is charging up your batteries to go off and do the other things that are actually harder and more challenging and need more focus. But we don't usually think about it that way. But it is true. It's called a creative outlet for a reason. Like, it's you get to kind of channel that energy into something. Everything else flows better. We just don't think about it that way.
Yeah. So now, if we're setting the journey here through your book and through the journey that you are teaching, sharing your personal experiences, as a person who's reading this and they're doing this journey, they've become more aware of the ecosystems they're in, versus what I hear there's like being automatic, doom scrolling. I'm at work and you don't think about it. Being more thoughtful about, hey, what are the different inputs from the world that are potentially opening me up or closing me down to my creativity. So what's next in your book is embracing your true voice. So that title implies that that we all have a true voice. It also opposite implies that there's something in the way of that, or that there's something in the way that our true voice, many of us don't embrace. At least the title implies that, because of what? So what do we want people to know about this section specifically in this part of the journey?
Yeah, thanks. So I really appreciate the way that you just put that about, like, there is an assertion even in that title that we all do have a true voice, so to speak. I think for a lot of creative people, part of where there's a lot of like spinning of wheels and inertia is thinking about things like, how do I know I'm doing something that is like the highest and best use of my creativity, or I don't know where to start, or something. Like your watercolor example is actually a really good example, because if I like left you to your own devices and I gave you paper and watercolor and pencil or paintbrush pencils, have fun, Jason. If I gave you everything that you needed and was like, I don't know, just make me something that says Jason, you would create something. Yeah.
You would probably think my 2-year-old did it, but yes, I would create something.
Yeah, like something would get created.
You'd be like, oh, that's a nice little picture that your 2-year-old did. Yeah, no, that was me.
No, that was me. Totally. Well, but there would be something about it that is distinctly you, because you made it. There's a style. Even if it is the wrong medium, there's going to be something about it that is innately you. And so that is the piece of this that I'm tapping into, is innately there is a creative essence in all of us that can drive us in any direction that we want to go to. So no matter what kind of project we're working on or what industry we're working in, we can always tap into that specific part of us to help guide us through whatever it is that we're working on. And it's important to me that this was the second piece of this book, because often when we're trying to like get through the muck or the digital noise, so to speak, or just the noise in any of our ecosystems, some of what we're left with is a lot of questions about like, okay, if I'm not overstimulated all the time, like, what am I doing creatively? I mean, it's a little dramatic, but there is often an existential question there about like, so who am I? And when you're picking up your creativity after maybe letting it be dormant for a long time, we come to believe that there is some big showy coming out process of like, this is who I am. Look at my album. Look at my painting. Look at, but that puts way too much pressure on our creative self, way too much pressure. So how are you supposed to create something lovely and vulnerable and cool and you, if you're constantly looking at like, how does it look and how does it look and how does it look and what are we going to do with it, et cetera? So that chapter really slows you down. And that's part of the book where I'm sharing about my literal loss of my voice for so many years. And that wasn't something I intended to write about when I started the book. But the more that I thought about how I want people to think about coming home to their creative self, I was like, oh, so part of that for me is definitely my relationship with my literal voice and the loss of it, not only as an outlet for my creativity, but also an outlet for joyfulness in my life and like a connection to myself. And so one of the exercises in that section, and by the way, for any of you listening, the book does actually have specific exercises for you to work on and work through this stuff. So you've got some really specific things to do. One of the exercises in that section is actually about you being able to start writing a little bit of the story of your relationship with your creativity so far, just to kind of get a little bit of a bird's eye view, a little bit of altitude over the relationship you've had with your creative self. And I say in the book, consider returning to this exercise multiple times, because it will change as you grow, but it will also reveal to you the parts of your creative voice that are very authentic and very true, because they'll just keep showing up over and over and over.
Yeah. I love that. So the journey is get present to what's true or the context that you're living in, the ecosystems in that case. How is it? You don't say this in the book, but I would say that when you get present to the ecosystems, all of these ecosystems are either adding or subtracting from your ability to find your true voice at all times.
Yeah.
There's not only like equal thing. One of the places that I do training work at is we talk about everything you say as a speaker either adds to your power or subtracts to it. There's not really any neutral thing. So once you've kind of said, oh, like, wow, at work, I feel like my creativity is crushed. But when I get home and I'm painting or I'm composing, that's an amazing place where I feel it going up. You get clear on that. And then you get clear on embracing what's true for you. And the third part of the book is at that point, creating your own experience. So first of all, question, experience of what? And then love to hear, like, what do you want people to know about that section?
Great. So creating your own experience of being creative in the age of digital noise. Bottom line.
There it is.
Yeah.
Look at that callback. It all comes back to the title of the book. Amazing.
It does. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It like wrote itself when I sat down to do it. So that's important because this third section really is a bit of a line in the sand that the book is kind of working towards to help you really get to a point where you're actually willing to be the one saying, okay, this is the experience I want for myself of my creativity. Digital noise is part of the world right now. Who do I want to be about it? And really specifically, what does that look like for my day-to-day life and my relationship with my creativity or my relationship with social media or whichever part of digital noise really speaks to you? So in coach speak, this would be the at cause invitation.
Mm.
And so there's that context shift of moving from being impacted to actually being fully at cause for what you need to be your creative self, given all of these different ecosystems that are in your world. And then that third section is a very tactical, strategic look at what does that actually mean? What are the systems and structures? Hey, do you want to actually go fully analog and cut digital noise out completely? Here's some things to think about. Or are you going to opt in and actually create a very supportive and hopefully not difficult relationship with these digital spaces? What does that actually look like? I think the book hopefully does a solid job of really normalizing the addictive nature of social media.
Yeah.
So this isn't one of those books that's going to gaslight you into being like, you should just lower your screen time. This is like, let's actually talk about the layers behind those moments when it's hard to put down your phone and focus on your own stuff.
Yeah.
And how can we create better habits for you that actually really support you being able to creatively thrive and also mindfully engage with the digital world?
Yeah. The social media thing is interesting because I know you and I trade some cool stuff on social. I don't do anything creative on social media I guess like I talk about my podcast, but I see a lot of the cool stuff on Instagram and it like inspires me. Like I'm like, oh, that's really, and I think it's really cool. So there's an idea that I think in here, what I hear in all of this message is also comparison is the death of your creativity.
Yes.
So if you look at that person, like just to call him out, I don't know his name, but I know you and I both love him. The DJ who like mixes in like Harry Potter, Star Wars, Mandalorian as a wedding DJ, wildly creative. I enjoy it immensely. And I don't look at him and go, and I don't ever look at him and go, ooh, I wish I was him. It's more like, what's my version of that thing? Because there's something that I think all of us have that would be, because that's such a unique thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I hear is like, what's my unique version of that creativity? And maybe it isn't a business strategy session. Like, how could I combine two things that I'm passionate about into like this one thing? Mm-hmm. And how social media gets such a bad rap. I'm like, oh, it's doom scrolling. Yeah, totally. The doom comes from comparing yourself.
Yes, 100%.
Not from the fact that there are people doing really cool creative things on social media or in anywhere.
Totally. There's a section where I'm talking about like structures and practices for different choices with stuff like this. And so I have people actually make a list of the intentions that they have for their use of social media and getting really specific about those intentions. And then I provide some lists of like, here's some common ones. And one of them actually is to go get inspired.
Yeah.
And then I wrote, this doesn't usually work for me because of the comparison game.
Yeah.
For me, it's more like, it's less of inspiration and it's more like, I like to be entertained and check out for 20 minutes and then I, move on. But there's like structures and parameters, and how can you make sure that it actually only is 20 minutes? And, because like the challenge for people who are like on the edge with their creativity, or one of the theme I explore in the book is about being a creative person and wanting to express your creativity more, but you go to this place of like, what's my thing? And like, how do I display my thing? Like my particular thing. It's a very common spiral of doom for a lot of people. And I think that when you are coming from that place, it's hard to actually enjoy amazing videos like that because of the comparison. But also, if you're thinking about making videos like that, it's really easy to then go into this place of like, how exactly does he do that? And do I need to think about how to do that? And how do you do this with the reel? And how do you do this and this and this? And then you start doing them and they don't get that many views. You know what I mean? There's just like all of this that's why I call it the spiral of doom, because that's
it really is.
What it
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a producer. I don't have a video editor. Oh, he must learn this himself. Well, maybe he didn't. Maybe he has somebody, his sister's doing it. Like, and then you compare like all the ways that they can do these things and you can't, versus just like, what do you want to do?
Totally.
And what would be your thing, your true voice, like you said?
Yeah. And like conversely, just to play over in your corner a little bit more, there is really something to be said for like, if you look at your favorite creators, part of what draws us to them is because their voice is front and center.
Yeah.
Like that guy whose name escapes me for some reason, which is ridiculous because I literally look at his stuff every day. I know when I'm seeing a video from him that it is going to be engaging and hilarious. And like, there's always going to be a couple moments where I'm like, oh, wow. You know,
like, yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's this innate him-ness.
That's right.
Infused into what he produces.
True voice.
Exactly. So that's why I think that's so important. It's not about performing your true voice. It's about being able to make things that are your true voice and that being meaningful to you.
Yeah. Laura, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Before we do that, any last kind of like thoughts or things that you think the audience need to know, you want them to know, just any, open thing here. And then we're going to talk about where the book is and all that good stuff, because we wouldn't want you on here without having people go and then get the book, of course. But like, what else would you want people to know about either you or the book before we wrap up for today?
Well, thank you so much. I want people to know this book was designed to be used and implemented, and then a friendly thing you can return to over and over and over. So I want you to think about the parts of you that might just be like waiting in the wings to be reactivated after just spending a little bit of time either listening to this or going through the book. I also think that I didn't realize it until the book was complete, but I realized that this book is really a blueprint about getting back to creative joy, which no matter what industry you're in or what type of creativity you grew up doing, I think is the thing that we all are really longing for in the first place. So that's really what this is about, is clearing out the clutter in the way of that. And I think that many of the goals that we set in adult life are really because we want to get back to something like that, like some sense of creative freedom or fun or joy or self-acceptance or something. So that's what this is really for. And that's what it's about. And I hope you have a great time.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. How can people connect with you first? And then we'll talk about the book. So how can people connect with you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at WestyGrammed, because that was the Instagram handle I picked back in 2012 when we were all putting Graham at the end of our Instagram.
And by the way, this is not a dog's page. It's actually Laura's page. It's not Westy's, although that would be cute too.
It would be super cute. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm linkedin.com/in/Laura Westman. And you can find my podcast with Bay is West of Wonderland Podcast. We are on Instagram at West of Wonderland Podcast, or you can listen to us on any platform where you like to get your podcasts. You can also purchase the book. It's available on Amazon for Kindle and paperback. And maybe by the time you're listening to it, you can buy it directly from me, signed, but probably not. I'm working on that end of the operation.
Yeah. This is where the creativity dies and the logistics handles is like the logistics of shipping out books is like, and here we stop our creativity. Now we just go into like, how the heck do I make this all work?
I know, totally. Well, my amazing assistant, Kelly, is like, she's working on the book page. And once all that is set up, it'll be actually pretty easy to do. But yeah, I think I'll just send you all right to Amazon.
Yeah.
And you can have your own beautiful copy. It looks exactly like this. Isn't it lovely?
It is. It's beautiful. Purple.
love
It's
it.
actually my new brand colors. Pretty much. I don't have orange, but I have like light blue, dark blue, and purple, which are some of my favorite colors.
Oh,
It's
that's so
beautiful.
cool.
It's thin. It's a great read. Laura, as you know, like as people listening know, I know Laura. Laura is an amazing creative person who's also good at getting stuff done and everything in between. Because, well, what's so interesting about writing a book is you have to be creative, but you also have to get something done because it takes discipline, whether it's 65 pages or 500 pages. I interviewed somebody yesterday who has a much longer book, and I asked him the same questions. When did you know you need to write this? And he also had the same thing, is like, it came to me like a songwriter. It came to me. I knew I had to do it, but his was longer. He's like, and it sucks writing a book sometimes. It really sucks. So you're like, is anybody going to read it? Is anybody going to like it? I don't have anything to say today. Am I ever going to not have writer's block again? But, you know, pound it out there.
Totally. I mean, this one was, to be clear, I have other writing projects that are just for fun. And those are the ones that are a little bit dramatic and up and down and challenging, you know? But this one came together very quickly because I knew the tool that it needed to be and that it would be. So, but I super understand that. I mean, we're not even talking about my fan fiction that is 40% done and lingering.
Would you like to make a coaching declaration here live on a podcast? No, I'm kidding. You don't need to do that.
This is
You're like,
it's just, it's, that's one of the spaces where like making a declaration would kill the vulnerability of it. Like it just needs to move at its own pace.
Oh, yeah. Since you mentioned it, to wrap up here, what kind of, can you share the universe the fan fiction lives in?
Oh, yes. It's the Wizarding World. It's Harry Potter.
I'm not shocked to hear this.
Of course you're not.
Very cool.
Am, because I never thought I would do anything like that. But our good friend Michelle Aiken is like a Harry Potter fan fiction fiend.
She writes some interesting Harry Potter fan fiction, is my understanding. And
she does.
I'll leave interesting to the imagination of people.
The interpretation of people. Yeah. I read her story, Draco Malfoy Gets a Life Coach, and two things struck me. Number one, how effortlessly she seemed to write the world Draco Malfoy, which was very interesting to me. Secondly, she wrote herself in the story as Draco's coach.
Yeah.
And Draco goes through a very intense transformation. And it was really moving. I was like, this is so cool. So after I read it, I was, frankly, the way that this whole thing even got started was I told Michelle that if she ever wanted to write a fan fiction about a little Slytherin American transfer student in a love triangle with two of the Marauders, that I would read the heck out of that. Wink, wink, wink. And we talked about it. And she asked some character development questions. And then she was like, I think you should just write it. And I was like, that's so stupid. But I did. And it's actually been really wonderful to write.
We'll have you back on to talk about it.
Or not. We never have to talk about it.
Or never. You're like, nope. This stays between trusted things.
It's fine. I know. The thing that's been really fun, though, is my main character is Remus Lupin, who is the werewolf.
Sure.
And I didn't realize, but werewolfism for him is very similar to my autoimmune disease. And so it's actually been really wonderful. I've been writing a lot about his relationship with his disease and his friends and his relationship with the moon. And it's been really healing for me to do.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Now I need to have Michelle come on here, and we need to talk about I haven't had Michelle on quite yet, but we talked about it. So
yeah, you got to Laura. She's the best.
Yeah. Seriously, a huge congratulations. It's so cool to see good people putting out good stuff in the world, making a difference for lots of people out there. Just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll have you back on soon to talk about your next project that you're willing to share with us.
Great. I can't wait. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Laura. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.
you.